Just dump all 6 kids on her. She's used to it. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Before we begin this story that might feel familiar, take a slow breath. Settle into your chair. Let the quiet of the room hold you, and allow the noise of the day to fade into gentle stillness. You're in a safe space here, a quiet world of story and strength. If you're joining from the United States, welcome. If you're watching from Europe, greetings to you. And to those from Asia, Africa, Australia, or anywhere the day is just beginning or the night has already deepened, I'm so glad you're here. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this story if you believe in the importance of respect and setting boundaries, no matter your age. It helps this cozy little corner of our community grow, and it lets me know you'd like more stories like this one. I was sitting in my cozy kitchen, sipping on my morning tea, when I overheard my son Walter talking to his wife, Beverly, just outside the door. It was one of those moments when you don't mean to listen, but you catch something you weren't supposed to hear. Walter's voice was loud, and I could hear every word as he said, "Just dump all 6 kids on Mom this Christmas. She's used to it." I froze. The teacup in my hand felt suddenly heavier. My chest tightened, and a cold wave of hurt rushed over me. My own son, my flesh and blood, just casually referred to me as a babysitter. I wasn't mom or grandma anymore. I was the fallback, the last resort, the one they could always count on, no matter what. I felt my heart sink deep into my stomach. I couldn't believe my ears. I'd spent years raising my children, making sure they had everything they needed, giving them everything I had, but somehow I had become a convenience, a stopgap when life got busy. Was that all I was to them now? Just someone to watch the kids, so they could enjoy their Christmas? I sat there for a moment, the silence in the kitchen suddenly deafening. Walter's words echoed in my mind, spinning around and around. I'd always been the caregiver, always the one who stepped in when needed. I'd cooked, cleaned, helped with school projects, and run errands. But now, in my late 60s, it was starting to feel like all I was good for was looking after their children while they took a break. And that hurt. I took a deep breath, setting my tea down on the table. The kitchen was warm and inviting, with the sun coming through the window and casting a soft glow on the counter. I've spent years here, years taking care of everyone else, and I thought I was okay with it. But now, the truth hit me hard. I wasn't okay with it anymore. I thought about the last time I had a holiday for myself. When was that? When was the last time I sat back and truly enjoyed a holiday without being stuck in the kitchen or running after the grandkids? It felt like it had been forever. I recalled the countless times I'd missed out on doing something for myself because I was too busy making sure everyone else had what they wanted. The holidays had always been a whirlwind of cooking, cleaning, and keeping everyone happy. But when was the last time anyone checked in with me to see what I needed or wanted? This wasn't the first time Walter had made offhand comments like that. He'd done it before, when they needed help with the kids or when they wanted to go away for a weekend and needed someone to watch the house. It always felt like I was expected to drop everything and make sure everything was taken care of. But this year, something inside me had snapped. I started thinking about the sacrifices I'd made over the years. There was always a birthday, a school play, or a last-minute emergency where I had to step in. And I did it without complaining. At least, I thought I didn't. But now, I could see it clearly. I had been taken for granted, treated like someone who had an endless well of energy and patience. But I wasn't endless. I was tired. I tried to remember the last time I did something just for me. A trip to the beach, a quiet day to myself in the garden. It had been so long that I couldn't even remember. Every moment had been consumed by the needs of others, my children, my grandchildren, my extended family, When was it my turn? I thought about Walter and Beverly's plans for Christmas. 6 kids. It sounded overwhelming just thinking about it. And yet, that was exactly what they were expecting me to do. Take care of them all. Was I supposed to just keep doing this year after year with no break? Was I supposed to keep being the dependable, always there for everyone mom and grandma, even if it meant sacrificing my own happiness? I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been doing it all wrong. I had spent so many years trying to be everything for everyone, but in the process, I had lost a part of myself. What had happened to Maria, the woman who used to be spontaneous, who dreamed of adventures and quiet nights by the fire? Where did she go? I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the snow-covered yard. The trees were bare, the ground was cold, and everything seemed so still. It felt like the perfect time to make a change. Maybe I didn't have to keep doing this. Maybe it was time to start thinking about me for once. But I also felt guilty. How could I just say no to my family? How could I break this cycle after all these years? My heart wavered as I thought about my grandchildren's excited faces, their innocent smiles. Would they understand? Would they be disappointed in me? The thought of letting them down made my stomach turn. But then I thought of myself again. Was I supposed to keep living my life as if it didn't matter? Was I supposed to continue being the one who held everything together while everyone else took a break? I didn't have the answers right then. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep going down this path. I needed a change. I needed to feel like I mattered, not just as a caregiver, but as Maria, the woman I used to be. And so I made a decision. I would do something for me. I wasn't sure what that looked like yet, but it was time to start putting myself first. And if that meant saying no to Christmas with my family, so be it. I was ready to take that first step. But even as I made that decision, I couldn't help but feel a wave of doubt. Was I being selfish? Or was this just the beginning of me finally finding some peace in my life? I didn't know the answers yet, but I was about to find out. As I sat there, staring out the window at the falling snow, I couldn't help but think about all the years I spent as a mother, always running from one task to the next. My mind drifted back to when I was younger, just starting out with a full house of kids and a husband who worked long hours. Tom and we built this life together. He was always busy, working to provide for us, and I was the one who kept everything together at home. There was never a dull moment. The kids were always needing something. School projects, after-school practices, birthday parties to plan. I remember those days like they were yesterday. I would wake up at 5 a.m, get the kids ready, make breakfast, pack lunches, then head to my job at the office. It was a grind, but it was our life. I loved it, even though I was always tired. It was the kind of exhaustion that made you feel proud because you knew you were doing something important. Tom was a good man, a provider, but he wasn't always around as much as I needed him to be. I didn't mind at first. It was just the way things were. But as the years went on, I started to feel like I was carrying the weight of everything on my own. The kids would come to me with their problems, their worries, and I'd handle it all. I didn't mind, though, because that's what you do when you're a mother, right? You take care of everyone else. Then, when Tom passed away 5 years ago, it was like the weight of the world came crashing down on me. Suddenly, I wasn't just the mother anymore. I was everything. Mom, dad, the emotional support, the rock for everyone. There was no one else to turn to, no one else to help carry the load. And I took it on because that's what I was used to. But now, 5 years later, I'm not sure how much longer I can keep going like this. I pulled myself out of my chair and walked across the room to the old dresser where I keep some of the family photos. There it was, the picture of Tom and me in our kitchen, standing with the kids. The photo was faded now, the edges worn from years of handling. Tom's arm was around my shoulder, and we were all smiling. It was taken on one of those rare occasions when we all gathered for a family dinner. A quiet moment in time before everything changed. I held the photo in my hands, running my fingers over the glass. I thought about how things used to be when we were a team. Tom and I, we didn't always get along, of course. Like any marriage, we had our ups and downs. But we were in it together. We were partners. I thought about how the family dynamic had shifted since his passing. The kids were older now, with families of their own. But I was still the one they turned to, the one who always showed up when they needed help, the one who always said yes when they asked for a favor. I did it all without question because I loved them. But this year, something inside me was different. I wasn't sure if it was worth it anymore. I spent so many years pouring myself into everyone else. Birthdays, holidays, soccer games, school events. Every little detail, every last-minute request. Everything was on my shoulders. And it was exhausting. But I kept going because that's what mothers do. They sacrifice. They give. They love. But at what cost? I looked back at the photo in my hands. Tom's face was smiling, full of life. My children were young, their faces bright and full of promise. We were a family complete. But now, it felt like everything was unraveling. The kids had their own lives, their own families. And while I was happy they had grown and moved forward, I couldn't help but feel left behind. I'd been the one holding everything together. But who was holding me together? No one seemed to notice how much I was giving up. No one seemed to care how tired I was. They just assumed I would always be there. And for the most part, I was. But this year, things had changed. This year, I wasn't sure if I could keep up the act anymore. I thought about the countless nights I'd spent alone after the kids went home. I'd clean up the house, do the dishes, and then sit in the silence. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of emptiness. The silence of a life spent taking care of others with no one to take care of me. And then I thought about Walter and Beverly's plan for Christmas. Just dump all 6 kids on Mom this Christmas. Walter had said. I couldn't help but feel a pang of resentment. They hadn't even bothered to ask if I wanted to spend the holiday with them. They just assumed, just like they always had. As I sat there holding the photo, I realized how much I had sacrificed. How many years had I given to my family? How many times had I put my own dreams, my own needs on the back burner to make sure they had what they needed? And now I was being treated like an afterthought, just someone to take care of the grandkids while everyone else had fun. I was more than that. I was a mother, a grandmother, a woman with my own life. And I wasn't sure I wanted to keep living like this. I wasn't angry, not really. I just felt tired of being the one everyone turned to when they needed something. Tired of being the one who had to always be there, no matter what. Tired of giving without ever getting anything in return. I stood up, still holding the photo. A thought crossed my mind. Maybe it's time for me to say no. For the first time in years, the thought didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel selfish. It felt like something I had every right to do. The realization hit me hard, but it also felt freeing. I had spent so much of my life giving everything I had to everyone else. But now, it was time to think about me. What did I want? What would make me happy? I wasn't sure yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be the fallback anymore. Not this Christmas. Not ever again. The next morning, I woke up early, the house still quiet as the world outside was still asleep under a blanket of snow. I sat at the kitchen table, the photo of Tom and me still in my hands. I had been thinking all night about what I overheard about my decision to not go to my family's house for Christmas. But the more I thought, the more I realized that I couldn't just ignore how I felt anymore. So, I did what I always do when I need to make sense of things. I made a list. I grabbed a piece of paper and a pen and began to write. I started with what I had given. Hours spent running errands for everyone. Years spent cooking and cleaning for family gatherings. Child care for the grandkids when their parents needed a break. Holidays, birthdays, special occasions, always the one to take charge. As I wrote it all down, I realized it wasn't just one or two instances. It was years of service, years of sacrifice. The list went on, and it felt like I had given every ounce of energy I had to others. I looked at what I had received in return. A thank you here and there. A birthday card. Good job when I did something right. The list was pretty much empty. I sat there, staring at it for a moment. It wasn't that I expected grand gestures or big thank yous, but when you've spent your life giving, you start to wonder, what do you get in return? What happens when your well of giving runs dry, and you realize there's nothing left of you? That's when it hit me. The bolt of lightning, as they say. I could keep doing this, keep being the go-to person for everyone's needs. I could keep being the one they dumped their kids on. Or I could stop. I stood up and walked over to the phone. Gwen had invited me to her cabin at Lake Erie a few months ago, and I had brushed it off. But now I needed it. I needed space, peace, and a chance to breathe. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "Maria, is everything okay?" she asked, hearing the urgency in my voice. "I need to get away for a bit," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Lake Erie, is it still available? I need it more than ever right now." She didn't hesitate. "Of course, Maria. I'll make sure everything's ready for you." I smiled, feeling a small weight lift off my shoulders. Gwen was one of those friends who always understood. No judgments, just support. Then came the harder part. I had already set aside a chunk of money for Christmas presents for the grandkids. It wasn't much, but it was my tradition to buy something special for each one of them. This year, I was about to do something I'd never done before. Instead of spending that money on their gifts, I decided to use it for my trip. For once, I was going to spend money on myself. I walked over to my purse, where I had the envelope with the cash. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of the decision. I thought of my grandkids' faces when they woke up on Christmas morning and found no gifts from their grandma. My stomach turned, and guilt started creeping in. What if they're upset? What if they feel abandoned? I stared at the envelope, and for a moment, I thought about returning it. I could always go to the store and buy something small for them, something that would make them happy. But as I stood there, looking at the envelope in my hands, I realized that the decision wasn't about the gifts. It was about me. I walked over to the table and sat down again, the money still in my hands. Would they understand? Would they be hurt by my decision? I thought of my oldest grandchild, Emma, who was 15 now. She always seemed to understand me more than the others. She would probably get it. But the younger ones, they wouldn't understand why Grandma wasn't there to spoil them this year. The guilt made my heart ache, but I knew deep down that this was something I needed to do. I had given so much of myself for so long, and I was exhausted. The thought of not having to worry about presents, parties, and cooking felt like a breath of fresh air. Just as I was about to call Walter to let him know, my phone buzzed. It was Gwen, checking in on me. "Maria, are you still planning to go?" she asked, her voice calm. I stared at the phone for a second, and then I smiled. Yes, I am," I said, my voice steady now. "I'm taking the money I had set aside for Christmas presents and putting it toward this trip. I'm putting myself first this time." Gwen's voice softened. "Good for you, Maria. You deserve it." I took a deep breath. It felt like I was finally stepping into my own life again, and it was terrifying. But at the same time, it felt liberating. This was my decision, and it was about time I made it. I hung up the phone and grabbed the envelope with the cash. I headed to the bank and cashed it in, putting the money into a travel fund. I was going to enjoy my time at Lake Erie, and for once, I wasn't going to feel guilty about it. I thought about Walter and how he'd react when I told him. I wasn't sure what he'd say, but I knew this decision was mine to make. I wasn't his caretaker anymore. I wasn't his backup plan. I was Maria, a woman who deserved some peace and quiet. That night, as I packed for the trip, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. I thought of the kids, of course, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel burdened by them. I didn't feel guilty for wanting to take care of myself. I was finally learning how to say no, and it was the most powerful thing I'd done in years. It was Christmas Eve. The house was quiet, and I was finishing packing my things for the trip. The excitement of finally doing something just for me was starting to settle in, but I knew that there was one thing left to handle. Walter. I had been avoiding his calls all day. I knew he'd want to know why I hadn't shown up for the Christmas gathering. I knew he'd be upset, and I wasn't sure how to explain it to him. But it had to be done. I had just finished putting my things in the car when my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Walter. I took a deep breath and answered. "Mom," he said, his voice already raised. "Where are you? We're all waiting for you. The kids are so excited to see you. You can't just leave us hanging." I felt the familiar knot in my stomach. Guilt. It crept in, slow and steady. The words felt like they were being squeezed out of me, but I couldn't let that stop me. I couldn't let him manipulate me like this anymore. "Walter," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'm not coming. I'm sorry, but I can't be there this year." There was silence on the other end of the line, and then he spoke, his voice incredulous. "What do you mean you're not coming?" "Mom, you have to come. The kids are waiting for you. This is Christmas. How could you do this to them?" His words hit me like a wave, but I refused to let it drown me. I was calm, but I was firm. "I'm not your nanny, Walter," I said, keeping my tone even. "I'm not going to be your default this year. I've been there for everyone for years. But I need a break. I need to do something for myself this time." I could hear him on the other end, pacing, frustrated. "But Mom, this is Christmas. The kids, do you know how disappointed they'll be? They're looking forward to seeing you. You're the only one who can handle them all. They love you, and you can't just leave them like this." I paused for a moment. The words he was saying were nothing new. It was the same old guilt trip I'd been receiving for years. "You don't understand," he continued. "We all need you, Mom. You can't just bail on us now." I let out a slow breath. I felt a flicker of doubt, but I pushed it down. This wasn't about me being a bad mother. This wasn't about me abandoning my grandkids. It was about me finally putting myself first, something I hadn't done in a very long time. "Walter," I said, my voice steady, "I love you and I love the kids, but I'm not going to keep doing this. You've all gotten used to me being the one who picks up the slack, the one who takes care of everything. But this year, I'm not doing it. I've given so much of myself for so long, and it's time for me to take care of me for a change." I could hear the frustration building in his voice. "So, what? You're just going to forget about us? About the kids? I'm not asking you to do everything. Just show up. It's one day. It's what you've always done." His words stung, but I held my ground. "I'm not asking for anything from you, Walter. I'm asking for peace. For myself. And if that means not being there this year, then that's what I need." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear him breathing, trying to process what I was saying. And then he said, his voice softer, but still full of frustration, "You really don't get it, do you? You're making this all about you, and it's not. We need you, Mom." I felt my chest tighten, But I didn't flinch. I've been there every single year, Walter. I've done everything for you and the kids. But I can't keep going like this. I'm tired. I need this time for myself. I could hear the anger building in his voice again. I don't believe this. You're doing this because you're angry, right? Because you feel like we've taken you for granted. But that's not our fault, Mom. We love you. You're making this harder than it has to be. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. It's not about anger, Walter. It's about my needs. And I've never put them first. But this year, I am. There was a heavy silence before he spoke again. I just don't understand. I guess this is your way of punishing us. Huh? By not showing up for Christmas. I felt a pang of hurt, but I didn't let it change my stance. I'm not punishing you, Walter. I'm taking care of myself. And it's about time I did. I could hear him trying to find the right words, his voice wavering. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Walter, I said gently. But this is my decision. I'm not changing it. There was another pause. I could hear the frustration, the confusion in his silence, but I didn't let it make me second-guess myself. I had made up my mind, and this time I wasn't backing down. Finally, he sighed. Okay, Mom, I guess if that's what you want, then fine. But don't think this is easy for any of us. I know, I said, my voice softening. I know it's hard, but I have to do this for me. The call ended with him hanging up abruptly, and I sat there, staring at the phone in my hand. I didn't feel relieved yet, but I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. I had done it. I had set a boundary with my son, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. The drive to Lakewood, Ohio was peaceful. It was a quiet little town, nestled by the lake, far from the noise of everyday life. The roads were clear, the sky was a soft gray, and the silence was welcome. Gwen's place was exactly what I needed, far away from the hustle of my family, from Walter's voice ringing in my head, from the constant feeling of being needed. When I arrived at Gwen's cabin, the air was fresh, and everything felt still. I stepped out of the car and took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool winter air. It felt different here, calm, safe, and quiet. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't rushing around. I wasn't thinking about what needed to be done next, or who I had to help. Gwen was waiting for me at the door, her warm smile greeting me as I walked inside. I'm so glad you're here, she said, hugging me tightly. You need this, Maria. The cabin was small but cozy, with a crackling fireplace and soft rugs on the floor. The kind of place where you could just sit and relax without any distractions. It was exactly what I needed. After I unpacked, I grabbed a cup of tea and stepped outside onto the porch, the lake stretching out before me, a blanket of snow covering the ground. I sat in one of the chairs, wrapped up in a warm blanket, and just stared out at the water. The gentle lapping of the waves against the shore was soothing. I didn't have to worry about anyone, anything. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was being pulled in 100 different directions. I spent the next few days like that. Long walks by the lake, mornings spent sipping tea in the cozy living room, afternoons reading books, and watching the snow fall. Every moment felt like a gift. I was learning how to just be, not doing anything for anyone else, but doing something for me. I thought about my life, the choices I'd made, the way I had always put my family first. I thought about how many years I'd spent worrying about what everyone else needed, always there to pick up the pieces when something fell apart. I had been the one who showed up, the one who did everything, without asking for anything in return. And now I was sitting here in this peaceful cabin, and for the first time in years, I wasn't feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. It wasn't easy to make the decision to put myself first. There was always this voice in my head telling me that I was being selfish, that I was abandoning my family. But out here, in this quiet place, I began to see things differently. Self-care wasn't selfish. It was necessary. I thought about my own mother, how she had always put herself last. She was a hard worker, always doing for others, but never taking time for herself. I had learned from her, or at least I thought I had. But now, I was starting to understand something I hadn't before. You can't pour from an empty cup. I had been running on empty for too long. And now, I was learning how to fill myself back up, slowly, piece by piece. Each morning, I took long walks by the lake. It was cold, but I didn't mind. The air was fresh, and the peacefulness of the place was like a balm for my tired soul. I'd walk for hours, letting my mind wander, not worrying about what I should be doing next. I wasn't thinking about Christmas or the kids or the guilt that had been eating at me. I was just walking, breathing, existing in the moment. On the second day, Gwen and I went into town for a bit. She took me to a small cafe where we sat by the window, drinking hot cocoa and chatting about anything and everything. It was the kind of conversation that didn't have to be rushed. There was no pressure, no deadlines, no obligations. I was learning how to just enjoy the present moment without constantly worrying about what was next. I hadn't realized how much I had been living for everyone else until I came here. For years, I had been caught up in this cycle of giving, of doing, of always being the one people turn to. But out here, away from it all, I saw things more clearly. I had been so busy taking care of everyone that I had forgotten how to take care of myself, how to enjoy life, how to just be Maria. It felt liberating to not have to play that role. It wasn't that I didn't love my family. I did, deeply. But I was starting to understand that I didn't have to sacrifice my happiness to make them happy. It didn't have to be at the expense of my own peace. By the third day, I had started to relax more. I wasn't thinking about Walter's phone call or the guilt that had followed me for so long. I wasn't looking at my phone, waiting for a message or a call from one of the kids. I was learning how to be still, to just be without needing to do anything for anyone else. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a soft shade of pink, I sat outside on the porch, my feet propped up on the railing. The world was quiet, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly at peace. It was as if the stress of the past few months had melted away, and I could finally breathe without feeling weighed down by everyone else's needs. This was the life I had been longing for, peaceful, quiet, and entirely my own. And for the first time, I wasn't feeling guilty about it. This was my time, and I was learning to embrace it. Christmas Day came and went, and I was far from the chaos of my family's expectations. The lake was still, the air crisp, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peaceful. I was sitting by the fire, sipping on my tea, when my phone buzzed. I knew it was coming. It was Walter. "Mom," he practically shouted over the phone. I could feel his anger even before he spoke. "You ruined Christmas. The kids are devastated. You didn't even send presents. How could you do that to them?" I felt a twinge in my chest. Guilt. It crept in like it always did, making me second-guess my decision. But I took a deep breath, and I remembered why I was here, why I made this choice for myself. "Walter," I said, my voice calm but firm, "for 20 years, my presence was your present. This year, I decided to give myself the gift of peace." There was silence on the other end. I could hear him breathing, trying to process what I had said. I didn't care if he didn't like it. This was my decision, and I had to stick with it. "Peace," he repeated, his voice rising again. "Is that what you call this? You're abandoning your grandchildren, Mom. They were looking forward to seeing you. They love you. And now nothing. I closed my eyes for a moment. The guilt was back, knocking on the door of my mind, but I refused to let it in. I'm not abandoning anyone, Walter. I'm just not going to be the one who always picks up the pieces anymore. I've done that for years. I've been there for every birthday, every Christmas. But this year, I need something different. You're being selfish, Mom. The kids, they need you. His voice was sharp, his words meant to twist the knife deeper. You couldn't even send a gift. I thought you were the one who always gave us gifts, who always made sure everything was perfect. I felt a pang in my heart when he mentioned the gifts. The money I had saved for presents was now sitting in my savings account, being used for my trip instead. The thought of letting them down lingered. Maybe I could have sent something small. Maybe I could have done something for them. But no matter what I did, it would never be enough for them. They'd always want more, always expect more. And I couldn't keep giving. No, Walter, I said, my voice softer now, but still firm. I'm not being selfish. I'm being honest with myself, for once. The kids are wonderful, but I'm not going to keep sacrificing my happiness for theirs. This year, I chose to take care of myself. His voice broke through the silence again, this time with a touch of frustration. So, what? You just walk away from us? From family? He paused, letting the weight of the question sink in. You didn't even give the kids a single present. Nothing. How could you do that to them? The words, how could you, hit me harder than I expected. I thought about the presents, the ones I had so carefully planned for. I thought about each grandchild, and the joy I usually felt picking out something special just for them. And now, I had nothing to offer them this year. But I knew, deep down, that what I was doing was right. The presents weren't what mattered. It wasn't about the things I could buy them. It was about the years I had already given. I'd always been the one to make sure everyone had what they needed, but this time I had to give myself what I needed. Walter, for 20 years, I was always the one who showed up. For birthdays, holidays, even when it wasn't asked for. But this year, I had to show up for me. I said, my voice calm but steady. I gave the kids my love every year. I gave them my time. But this year, I gave myself the gift of peace. And that's the most important thing I could have given myself. He was quiet again. I could hear him processing my words. Then, he said, almost bitterly, you really don't get it, do you? The kids needed you, Mom. They've been asking about you all week, and you just disappear. You take the money you had for presents and use it for a trip. I don't get it. I could feel the weight of his words, but I didn't let them crush me. The money, it wasn't just about the money. It was about the years I had put in, always giving and never asking for anything in return. I had always been there, but this year I needed something different. I needed to take care of myself. I'm not going to keep making myself miserable to make you happy, Walter, I said, the words coming out clearer now. I love you and the kids, but I can't be your emotional labor anymore. I've been doing it for too long. I can't keep putting myself last, just to make everything easier for you. There was a long silence. I could tell he didn't know what to say. He couldn't argue with that. Not really. Maybe he didn't fully understand yet, but I had to believe that in time, he would. I don't understand why you couldn't be there, Mom, he said, his voice quieter now. Why couldn't you just be there like you always are? I let out a long breath, because I've always been there. But this time, I had to choose me. This is what I needed. The call ended shortly after that, and I sat there in silence, the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. I felt conflicted. Part of me was relieved, but another part of me was still wrestling with the guilt of letting them down, the guilt of not being the perfect mom or grandma this year. But when I looked out the window at the calm lake, the peaceful setting around me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace. I was finally doing something for me, and that made all the difference. 2 months had passed since I made the decision to walk away from the chaos. It was the best decision I'd made in years, and the change was more noticeable than I ever expected. I started to feel like me again, not just the woman everyone turned to when they needed something. It wasn't that I didn't love my family, I did deeply, but this time, I was learning how to love myself too. I woke up every morning with a sense of calm. There was no rush, no deadlines, no one expecting anything from me. It was all mine to decide, and that simple fact was incredibly freeing. I had started volunteering at the local library, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time for. I loved being surrounded by books, their quiet presence offering a peaceful escape. It felt good to be useful in a way that was not driven by obligation. The librarian, Kathy, was kind and always ready with a smile. She'd often ask me if I was interested in helping with the weekly reading hour for the kids. I never said no. It felt good to be part of something, without the pressure of needing to give more than I had. The library was a place where I could simply be Maria, without the constant weight of responsibilities or expectations. I found joy in the small things. I'd spent so many years running, making sure the kids had what they needed, that I forgot to take care of myself. Now, I was taking back that time. I was learning to be present for me. In the afternoons, I would go to my little garden. It wasn't big, just a few raised beds with tomatoes, herbs, and flowers, but it was mine. For years, I'd spent more time maintaining the needs of others than I had ever spent on myself. Now, I spent hours in the garden, picking weeds, trimming the flowers, or just sitting there in the silence. Sometimes I'd make tea and bring it outside with me, sipping it slowly while I watched the birds fly by. It may seem small to some, but it was everything to me. I had come to realize that peace didn't always have to be loud and dramatic. Sometimes it came in the quiet moments, the simple ones that we often overlook. My neighbors had noticed the change too. It wasn't just the garden. It was how I carried myself now. I was no longer frazzled or overwhelmed. I no longer felt like I was in a race to get things done. One neighbor, Linda, even commented on it one morning when I was out on my walk. She said, "Maria, you look different. Happier, maybe?" And I was. I really was. I smiled at Linda, realizing just how true that was. I wasn't running around for everyone else anymore. I was living life for me. I was making decisions that were about my happiness, not about what someone else expected. In the evenings, I started cooking for myself. It wasn't anything fancy, but it felt good to be making meals that I actually enjoyed. No more big family dinners with me slaving away in the kitchen, making sure everything was perfect. I made simple dishes, roasted chicken with vegetables, homemade soup, fresh salads. The food was nourishing, not just for my body, but for my soul too. I had become more intentional with my time. I didn't feel the pressure to overextend myself for others anymore. I was doing things that fed my spirit, whether it was reading a good book, going for a walk, or simply sitting in the garden, enjoying the sun. But it wasn't just about the quiet, peaceful moments. It was also about the small adventures I began to embrace. I had started to travel. Nothing big, just small weekend getaways to places I'd always wanted to visit, but had put off. A few weeks ago, I took a trip to Cleveland to see the art museum. It was beautiful. I spent the day exploring, looking at paintings, reading the descriptions. I didn't rush through it like I used to. I stayed as long as I wanted. And when I felt ready, I left. I didn't have a schedule. I didn't have a deadline. It was my time. It was a new way of living. And I was slowly starting to see how much I'd been missing by always putting others first. One of the biggest shifts was in how I looked at the family. I still loved them, of course. But now, I didn't feel the need to fix everything for them. I didn't feel responsible for their happiness. I had been carrying that weight for so long that it became part of who I was. But now, I was learning that I didn't have to do it all. I started making small boundaries. Simple ones, like not answering the phone the minute it rang if I was busy, or saying no when I didn't feel like taking care of the grandkids. At first, it was uncomfortable. I felt guilty, like I was letting them down. But over time, I started to feel empowered. Saying no didn't make me a bad mother or grandmother. It made me someone who could finally take care of herself without feeling selfish. I found myself having more time for friends, too. Gwen and I met for lunch every couple of weeks. We'd sit and talk for hours, laughing, reminiscing, sharing stories. It was a reminder of the person I used to be, the person I had almost forgotten. The woman who laughed easily, who enjoyed life without worrying about everyone else. Looking back, I could see how much I had changed. The weight that had been on my shoulders for so many years had finally started to lift. I wasn't the same person I had been when I was always the caretaker, the one who said yes, the one who lived for everyone else's needs. I was now someone who was choosing her own happiness, and it was a beautiful feeling. But it wasn't always easy. There were days when the guilt would creep in, when I would second-guess myself and wonder if I was being too selfish. But then I would take a deep breath, remind myself of why I was doing this, and move forward. It wasn't a perfect journey, but it was mine, and that's what mattered most. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for taking up space. I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. I was living the life I had worked so hard for, and it felt good. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer bound by the expectations of others. I had freed myself, and that was the most powerful thing I could have done. As Christmas approached again, I found myself reflecting on the past year. I looked back at how much had changed, how much I had changed. I'd made the decision to step away from the role I had played in my family for so many years. The role of the constant caregiver, the one who always said yes, the one who was always there when they needed me. And you know what? It felt right. It wasn't easy, but it was the best thing I could have done for myself. I still loved my children and grandchildren deeply, but my perspective on family had shifted. I no longer saw myself as someone who had to sacrifice everything for them. Love, I realized, doesn't require constant self-sacrifice. Family shouldn't take you for granted, and it shouldn't expect you to give up your happiness for theirs. I used to think that being a good mother and grandmother meant always putting their needs first, but that mindset had worn me down. I had been so busy giving and doing that I forgot about me. I forgot about the woman who had dreams of her own, the woman who once knew how to laugh without feeling guilty, the woman who deserved to live life on her own terms. Now, when I looked at my family, I didn't see a group of people who needed my endless service. I saw individuals who had their own lives, their own needs. And as much as I loved them, I understood that I couldn't continue to give everything without taking something back for myself. I thought about the past few months. I'd spent time doing things I hadn't done in years, like volunteering at the library, gardening, cooking meals for myself, and traveling. I felt like I was finally getting to know myself again. But with that newfound freedom came the realization that I had been taken for granted. I had allowed it to happen out of love and duty, but that didn't make it right. And this time, I wasn't going to let it continue. I still talked to my children, of course. I still saw my grandchildren, but now things were different. I had boundaries. I wasn't just the person who showed up to fill in the gaps anymore. I was a person with my own needs, my own life, and my own happiness to protect. And I wasn't going to apologize for that. As the next holiday season rolled around, I felt a quiet strength. Christmas wasn't about the chaos, the stress, or the endless obligations. It was about love, Yes, but love that didn't come at the expense of my own well-being. This year, I planned to spend the holidays how I wanted to, and I wasn't going to feel guilty about it. I had learned the hard way that sometimes we have to let go of people who take us for granted. It's not about abandoning them. It's about making room for the people who appreciate us for who we are, not just for what we can give. As I looked out the window at the snow gently falling outside, I realized that I had given myself something I hadn't had in years, peace. And that peace was more important than any holiday dinner or family gathering. I knew that there would still be moments when I would feel the old pull to go back to the way things were. It wasn't easy to change a lifetime of habits, but I also knew that I had made the right choice for myself. I didn't have to be everything for everyone. I just had to be me. Now, I want to ask you, the people watching this, have you ever felt taken for granted? Have you ever been the one who always said yes, the one who always stepped in, but found that it was never enough? How do you set boundaries with your family? How do you take care of yourself while still loving those around you? I know it's not easy, but I want you to know that you're not alone. It's okay to take a step back. It's okay to put yourself first. You deserve it. And sometimes when we take care of ourselves, we end up being better for those we love. So take a moment and think about it. Maybe it's time to put down the weight you've been carrying for so long. Maybe it's time to find your own peace, your own happiness. I'm here to tell you it's possible. And it starts with saying no when you need to, setting boundaries, and finally putting yourself first. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think. Have you ever set boundaries with your family? How did it feel? What changes did you make in your life to take care of yourself? This journey isn't just mine. It's for anyone who's ever felt like they've given too much and forgotten about themselves. You're not alone, and it's never too late to start living for you. So now that the holiday season has passed, and I've had time to reflect on everything, I want to ask you, what do you think? Was I wrong for taking the money I saved for the kids' presents and using it for myself? Should I have handled it differently? Should I have gone back to the way things were just to avoid the guilt and disappointment? I'd love to hear what you think. Maybe you've been in a similar situation, or maybe you're still struggling with putting yourself first. I know I didn't have all the answers, but I did know that for the first time in years, I was making a decision for me, and that felt right. I want you to leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Have you ever had to set boundaries with your family? What did it feel like to take that first step toward putting yourself first? Did it make you feel empowered? Or did you have doubts like I did? It's not easy to make these decisions, especially when it feels like you're letting people down. But as I've learned, sometimes we have to let go of the people who take us for granted to make room for those who will appreciate us and respect our boundaries. And if you've enjoyed this story and found something in it that speaks to you, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, because I'll be sharing more about my journey, and I hope it helps you on yours. Don't forget to download this wonderful book called 38 Uplifting and Funny Short Stories for Seniors. Easy-to-read tales that bring laughter, memories, and mental stimulation. It's full of heartwarming, simple stories written to bring a smile, stir up memories, and remind us that joy doesn't fade with age. It grows stronger. You'll find it in the pinned comment below. Now, if you like this story, go ahead and click on the next video appearing on your screen, because in it is a story of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before on her Kindle stories. Take care of yourself. And remember, it's never too late to make a change in your life. You deserve peace too.